Hey YouTubers, it's your pal EMDSD14R, and this is part 2 of the ER&W roster. Uh, this episode is actually called SD Cadillacs. So these are the classic SD units that are on the ER&W roster, and all the units here represent each class of the Cadillac roster. There will be more units in the future, hopefully, but these are the current units that I have right now. So the units on the right over here, these are the SD24Rs. The units right here, these are the late variants of the SD14R. And then this here is the only SD26 on the ER&W roster. So let's get started. So the class unit of the SD24R roster is this unit here. This is ex Burlington Northern, ex Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy. It's a former SD24, but it's been rebuilt by the ER&W to a SD24R. So the SD24R class is basically an upgraded version of the standard SD24. They have 645 power assemblies, and they also have Dash 2 electronics. They also feature upgraded traction motors as well. This unit was actually patched, as you can see. And this was actually the first locomotive that my friend Radisson did for me. Oh, this was back in 2009, I want to say? 2009. I think so. But it's also the oldest unit in the SD24R roster. Next up is the 241. 241 is a former Santa Fe Tiger Stripe SD24. Like the 240, the 241 has been upgraded to the SD24R class. It's been beautifully restored to its as-delivered Santa Fe Tiger Stripe scheme. Other than that, there wasn't really any other modifications done to the unit except what was similar to the 240 over here. But it's been beautifully restored, and one of the pride and joys of the classic Cadillac SD24 type units. So now we're coming to the next two in this class, the 242 and the 243. The 240, these two units are technically oddballs in the SD24R roster, in that these units are extensively rebuilt units in this class. Let's start with the 242 here. 242 was actually a wreck damage unit, so it started out as a Union Pacific SD24, but it was involved in a wreck, and this was actually rebuilt in the early 80s, at Wells Locomotive Works. So if you look on the roof detail here, there's several different fans here. The rear two fans are the original SD20. These are actually Q fans actually. So the parts on here are variety. So you have fans like Q fans from either the Jeep 60M or Jeep 60, and then you have SD 40-2 fans, and then you have the roof-mounted air tanks here, which these actually came off of our Torpedo Jeep 9, and they were actually grafted on here. It's very similar to what was done with the Santa Fe SD26s. 242 is also unique in the fact that it actually has a 710 prime mover. So this actually has a 710 prime mover, which is highly unusual. It also has a unique angular turbo blower duct, which is different. Yeah, and it also features a GE style bell, which is really cool. And it has an M5 horn, which is actually reversed. So the 3 bells are facing towards the rear, and then 2 bells are facing towards the front. And it also features nose headlights and Mars lights as well. And then going here to the 243, this unit was actually also rebuilt. It actually has a SD50 style blower duct housing right on the side of the unit. And this is the only SD24R that actually has this type of blower duct housing. It's actually powered by a 645 prime mover, which is pretty cool. It has a P5 type horn. Other than that, it's pretty much a standard looking SD24R. But these units, these two units, are the oddballs in this class. They are completely oddballs. At one time, the 242 did actually have a 645 prime mover, but then it was late. Excuse me. Then it was later switched out for a 710 prime mover. Yeah. So, and the purpose, pretty much the purpose of this class is for, low. They can be used in, manifest freight service, but they're mainly good for low speed, heavy pulling operations. So like iron ore service or coal train service. You will normally see these units in coal train service, but you will find them occasionally on manifest freights or sprinter trains. They will be seen on other trains like that. They will be occasionally on the limestone trains. They're really good for the limestone trains. The ER&W loves them on the limestone trains, or like I said, iron ore trains. And then we go over here to the SD14Rs. Now these are late SD14Rs. So early SD14Rs were rebuilt from SD7 and SD9s, while the later units were rebuilt from SD24s. These units basically have deturboed. They're basically deturboed units, so they still have their 567 prime movers in them, but they have 645 power assemblies. The early SD14Rs, they have cylindrical exhaust stacks. I don't actually have that model out here to show you guys. I'm actually going to be just rebuilding that one. But to show you the late versions, I'm going to show you the spotting differences. So this is a beautifully restored Santa Fe unit. It's been restored to its as-delivered blue bonnet scheme. And as you can see, the turbocharged exhaust stack was removed. And two Superlift spark assessor exhaust stacks were actually added here to this unit. And the same thing with the beautifully restored Burlington unit here, except with this unit the winterization hatch was actually shortened to accommodate the Superlift spark arresters here. And it also has a Leslie RS3L horn from a retired Conrail unit. But yeah, just like the SD24Rs, the SD14Rs are great for, low tonnage or like for low speed, heavy haul services. These would be used in iron ore service, limestone train service. You could probably find them on coal trains. You can pretty much find them in any kind of class of work. And they're also used in local service too. But yeah, the early versions of these were SD7 and SD9 models. There are going to be a couple more rebuilt SD24s that have this same feature, but they're not. There's not going to be that many of this class of the late SD14Rs. They also feature Dash 2 electronics, upgraded traction motors, and so forth. And then last but not least, we have the only SD26 currently on the ER&W roster. It's been beautifully restored to its as delivered Bluebonnet scheme, it still retains its original number. I am thinking about sublettering this unit to ER&W. I actually was planning to number this unit into the SD24R class, but I'm just probably going to leave it in the SD26 class since it's so unique. And you can actually tell, since I have it over here, you can actually tell where the 242 got its roof-mounted air tanks from. So that's where the idea came from. Yeah, the SD26s, they're pretty much used, it's pretty much a mixed, you can find this engine in any kind of service, manifest freights, coal drags, pretty much anything like that. If I find another SD26, I probably will get it and pair it up with this unit. That way I have two on the roster. But they're not easy to find. The Santa Fe ones are not easy to find. You're more likely to find the Guilford ones as opposed to the Santa Fe units. All these engines will get sound in DCC. I think I might go with ESU sound, but I'm not sure just yet. And they will, and the units that have the nose lights and the Mars lights, they will get fully functioning Mars light packages. And since they have Mars lights, they don't need ditch lights by FRA rules. The units that don't have Mars lights, they probably will get ditch lights installed in them. But yeah, that's the SD Cadillac roster for the ER&W. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video of these locomotives. Oh, I forgot to mention, the SD14Rs, the late versions, were rebuilt around the same time as these two units here. So around the early 80s to mid 80s for these units here. Obviously, all these are like pretty much pre 1990s rebuilds. This one here, you could probably say that one is like late 70s because it's the oldest one in the entire fleet. So that's the oldest one in the entire fleet in the SD24R class. The SD14Rs, the early versions, actually have a predate that's around the mid 70s to late 80s, because that roster is a little bit bigger, slightly. But yeah, I just wanted to share this with you guys. I hope you enjoyed this next video with the ER&W roster. More coming soon. Peace, y'all.